I'm Don Powell, and I currently live in Galveston, Texas. I came down here in 1991 from the University of North Carolina, where I'd been chairman or chief of GI there for 20 years. And I came down here to Texas to be chairman of medicine, but after being chair of medicine, I ran the GI division a while too. So I've sort of been, was associate dean. I've sort of done all sorts of things here. I was president of the AGA in 1993-94.
So could you give us a brief background on how you got into medicine and specifically how you got into gastroenterology?
Sure, yeah. I started out at Auburn University in engineering. This was the time of Sputnik. And so, you know, young people that were interested in science were going to go into engineering, and we were going to make the U.S. Competitive with Russia in space and all sorts of things like that. But after I got into engineering for 3 years, I began to realize I didn't really like it. I really wanted to do something that had more to do with people. And I'd read a book by Sinclair Lewis called Aerosmith, and it was about an investigator, a biomedical investigator at what was really Rockefeller Institute in New York. And that intrigued me. So I took a course in biochemistry and really loved it. So I decided I would switch my major after 3 hard years in engineering to pre-medicine, and did that, and then went to medical school at the University of Alabama in Birmingham.
And how did gastroenterology interest you?
Well, when the summer before I entered medical school, I went to Birmingham looking for a job. Actually, I went to Birmingham chasing a young lady that I'd been dating at Auburn, but I said I better find a job to support myself. So I went to the medical school and asked if they had jobs, and they said, yeah, we have a new chief of GI here, and he has an active lab and he needs some young people to help him. So they sent me over to him. And this man was Basil Hershowitz. And I don't know if you know that name, but he's the man that invented the fiber optic endoscope, which really started gastroenterology on its major expansion as a very important subspecialty. He also was a biomedical scientist, excuse me, and a great clinician. So he showed me what it was like to be an academic gastroenterologist, a place where I could do research, which I truly love to do, but also take care of patients. And so he really is the person that's sort of guided me into a career in academic gastroenterology.
That's amazing. What would you tell someone today who's considering going into gastroenterology?
Well, I think it's a wonderful subspecialty, and it's a chance to really do two different kinds of things. One is it has become a very procedural oriented specialty. Back when I started, it was predominantly a cognitive specialty, where what you did with your brain, like a general internist, was more important than what you did with your hands. But with the growth of endoscopy, it's become more and more of a procedural subspecialty, except for perhaps those people who choose to go into hepatology, which is, and those are people that are perhaps a little bit more interested in the cognitive aspects of GI disease. So I think you can have it both ways, and it's a great subspecialty. It pays well, that helps. There are jobs available, that helps. It's got a great future, and so I encourage people as much as I can to choose our subspecialty over many of the others where they have a choice.
So what motivated you to get involved with the AGA, to serve on the board and become president?
Yeah, well, I started going to Digestive Disease Week back when it was just the AGA meeting. This was back in the late 60s when I was in the Army at the university, at Walter Reed Institute of Research. And those meetings showed me sort of what society could do for a subspecialty and could do for science, and as a venue for advancing the whole specialty. And so when I had a chance, I got appointed to abstract selection committees, and then moved on to the board as a research counselor. And then from all of that became the vice president. Now, there were many other sort of jobs that I volunteered for along the way. And I think I showed that I could work hard and do something for the specialty. And so that led me to be appointed to the governing board, and from there to be selected as vice president and then president. That long expansion that you spend on the governing board is really very valuable, because you get steeped in the issues that are going on both before you become president, and then after you become president, you stay on for several years. And all of that together makes for great continuity, and I think helps the leadership and helps you direct the specialty in the direction that it needs to go.
What were some of the issues that AGA was focused on during your presidency, or during that entire time when you were kind of going through the presidential structure?
Sure. Well, when I became president, gastroenterology was in trouble. This was the start of managed care, and it was beginning. There was a lot of talk about that we didn't need as many gastroenterologists as we currently were training, because managed care, the idea was that you didn't send people to subspecialists, and that the generalist, family medicine and internal medicine, took care of all of these people. And the other thing was that these general specialties and the surgeons were beginning to do more endoscopy. So the whole specialty was a little bit threatened. And then came the specter of the Clinton healthcare reform, which was going to be directed almost entirely toward promoting managed care. And so we all began to be frightened that perhaps there weren't going to be jobs for young gastroenterologists. And indeed, in some cities like New York, gastroenterologists were sort of the young ones that weren't established were underemployed. So there was a threat to our whole being, actually. And so we undertook several things to try to get information about that and to try to do something about it. One of the first things we did was we commissioned a manpower study. And that study showed that, yes, as we had suspected, we were training more gastroenterologists than were going to be needed for primary care. But not only that, but there was a big distribution problem. Gastroenterologists were maldistributed across the country. They were sort of situated along the coast, the East Coast, and all the corridor there, the West Coast, some along the Houston and New Orleans, along the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico, and then up the central part, and up the Mississippi River and St. Louis, and then on up to Chicago. And this is where the majority of the gastroenterologists were. And so there was a lot of competition. And yet in all of the other healthcare service areas in the country, there were many, over half that had no gastroenterologists at all. So there was a big maldistribution. And so we suggested and began to lobby for the idea that we would begin to decrease the number of trainees, that we didn't need this many gastroenterologists. And then sort of two very important things happened that really changed all of that. First, the Clinton healthcare reform didn't pass. So all of the plans and the governmental impetus that would drive more and more managed care suddenly wasn't there. And that made a huge difference. And then the other thing was that we needed to increase the visibility of gastroenterologists. We needed people to understand what we did and why we were important in healthcare. So we undertook two initiatives. One with a big grant, a $10 million line of credit from Astra Merck. We established first a national televised series of question and answer meetings where we portrayed what gastroenterologists do and how they improve the health care of the nation. We began to fund and encourage healthcare outcomes research, health services research that would show that what we did really truly made a difference. And all of that was important, but none of it was as important as what happened at the typical American scene, the way things happen, was there was a lady, an anchor for the Today Show named Katie Couric. She was a wonderful, everybody's girlfriend, the U.S. A national girlfriend and little sister, and everyone loved her. And her husband tragically had recently died of colon cancer, and he had not had colonoscopies. So she decided to have a colonoscopy on the Today Show. And indeed, they televised her colonoscopy. And it was such an impressive thing. It swayed so many people's minds about what gastroenterologists could do in terms of cancer prevention that within a year, Medicare had passed the bill to begin to pay for colon cancer screening. And that changed the whole direction and of our subspecialty, really. And in fact, Katie Couric apparently, I'm told, goes around and tells people still that she's the one that's responsible for the livelihood of gastroenterologists. And I think to a certain extent, she's correct. So these things that happen outside of traditional, logic and attempts, they play a big role. The fact that the healthcare reform of Clinton didn't pass, the fact that Katie Couric decided to have her colonoscopy on national TV, that led to Medicare paying for colon cancer screening. All of those things changed the whole course of our subspecialty. And I think we began to really expand after that. I think it made all the difference in the world in terms of where we were going and what we needed to do. One of the other things that happened during my presidency was my concern and that of others that we were a disjointed subspecialty. We were not aligned and all pulling in the same direction like the cardiologists were. We had 4 different societies, and although there was talk and interaction between them, it was more begrudging than it was willing and active and effective. And so we were not working together for the things that were important for our specialty. We were working more for what was important for our society. And yet here we were faced with a real problem with managed care and maybe too many gastroenterologists. So I set out to try to federate the societies and to get the societies to begin to work together. And we had some success at that. We actually formed an association called the Federated Societies of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. And we worked together through all of this healthcare reform and actually also on these public relation campaigns and that Astra Merck had funded to try to improve the image of gastroenterologists. And that was very successful. But just like what happened after World War II, after the threat, the thing that brought us together, and Churchill had talked about this, the thing that allowed all of the allies to work together in World War II was a common enemy. And that was true for us in gastroenterology. But soon as that sort of common enemy of managed care and not and the uncertainty of our future disappeared, then unfortunately, the willingness of all of the societies to maintain that close federated relationship disappeared too. So the federation sort of faded away. But I think it did leave a little bit better communication amongst the societies than what had happened before. But still, those things are very delicate, and they're issues of trust and one group feeling slighted by the activities of the other group, and still something that we have to constantly work to overcome, because that's not good, I don't think, for the specialty of gastroenterology. So those were some of the things that happened when I was president. I think they were troubled times, but we got through them successfully, and they actually set the stage for gastroenterology being what it is today, which is a very successful subspecialty.
So you have had such a incredible impact on AGA based on your work as president and on the board. I'm wondering what impact leading AGA had on you as a person, personally. What was the effect of AGA for you?
Sure. Well, it had a huge impact. First, I think it taught me several things. One is that you can get people to work together. You can overcome mistrust, and you can make things happen. And this is, and overcome the prejudices of one group or the other. And this was really an important lesson for my future career. I'm sorry, my future career as well. The other thing that it taught me was that there are things that you can't predict. You can start out on a course of action that's logical, that makes sense, and you can have some great success at it. But then other external factors, like the failure of healthcare reform to pass, or like Katie Couric's televised colonoscopy, those things have tremendous impacts that you're completely out of your control, that change in many ways what you were trying to do. So and I think that taught me that I need to pay a little bit more attention to the fact that unintended consequences happen at even when you have a really valid point and direction that you're trying to go, that might change and alter tremendously what you were doing. The other thing was that I learned was that they're a wonderful group of people to work with. They're smart people, and that you learn from them, and that those times on the AGA board were informative. They taught me a lot. They also made me many lasting friendships. I just went to the AGA again in person this last year in San Diego a month ago, and really enjoyed it. And I went, certainly for the science and for the medicine, but I went mainly because I wanted to see all my old friends and renew, after the pandemic separation, my total enjoyment of seeing those people and being with them again. So I think those are some of the things that are most important to me that I learned from my time on the governing board and being part of organized gastroenterology.
So you're fresh off of DDW in San Diego. What are your thoughts on where AGA is today?
Well, I think we're in a pretty good shape. We have, I think, now finally a right balance between our research, promotion of research, which, when I came on the board back then, the AGA was known as the academic research-oriented society that didn't pay a lot of attention to clinicians. I think that has changed. I think I helped change that, but I think it's in the right balance now. We raised tremendous amounts of money for young investigators through the foundation and leadership of people like Bob Sandler. And we, I think, are doing the kinds of things that bind us to our clinicians and help them in their practice. And I think we do some other things too. We take the high road on issues like this diversity campaign. I think that's a tremendous thing that we're doing, because those are the things that need to be done. They're over and above what puts money in our pocket or research money in our labs or better healthcare. They're over and above that. And all of those things make the AGA, I think, the premier society. Of course, I'm very, very biased.
Me too. What's your hope for AJ's future?
Well, I think they need to continue on this course of action, of paying attention to the needs of all of the constituents. And I think they're doing a good job at that. I have to confess, I still worry a little bit about the divisions between our societies and the others. I got to know a lot of those people that were in the leadership roles of the ASGE and the Liver Society and the American College of Gastroenterology, and they're good people. And I think we need to work hard at maintaining our relationships with them. And I think we do when there are concerted efforts that need to be faced, where we can all get on board to work together. These tend to be governmental issues that we try to overcome. But I wonder sometimes, what might we do for our specialty if we could get together and do things that aren't threats, that might expand our specialty in a given way. So I still have some hope that, and my advice is to continue to try to make that happen, although I know that's not a very popular thing to do.
So thank you so much for talking with us today. Is there anything else you want to share about your time with AGA that I haven't asked you about?
Well, yeah, there's one thing I think, and this is the issue of mentoring. I've been tremendously blessed by having a whole group of young mentees that have gone on to play important roles in gastroenterology, not the least of which is our two AGA presidents, Bob Sandler and Sheila Crow, who both either trained with me, or I gave Sheila her first job in gastroenterology after she finished her training. But there were other people in gastroenterology, like Balfour Sarter and Doug Drossman and Jay Pasricha, and these are all people that went on to have big roles in gastroenterology. And Jim Frakes, who was the president of the ASGE back in about 2000. These are all people that either trained with me or who I had really good relationships with it. And so I hope the AGA will continue to be a source of mentorship for young people, and because I think that's the future of leadership, is to be mentored by people and to maintain that and then mentor others. So I hope that will continue, and I would like to see the AGA work hard on that.